Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Joseph. If you follow this channel, you know my previous video was on how I captured this image. I'm going to insert a little clip right here in case you missed it. But then if you want to see the entire behind the scenes video on how I captured this image, then I'm going to put the link in the description and also in the card, and then you can check it out. But today's video is a part 2 where what we are going to be doing is finalizing the image. When I was capturing this during the photo shoot, I was saying that it isn't a complete image, at least for me, because I know that there is a whole lot that can be done to the image. And even at that point, I didn't even know how or in which direction the image is going to go. So I was experimenting, playing around, and then I finally decided to, do this to the image. I know it's not too complex, but you really are going to see all the steps that I took and the elements I used to create the image and how I brought everything together. So if it's something that you're quite excited about, I recommend you stay through to the end of the video because you might learn a thing or two. And if you're just excited to see how we're able to transform the image from this really simple photo shoot into something a little bit complex and interesting like this, then also stick through to the end of the video and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. And I think we can actually start from the beginning. So the first thing that I did is I brought all of the images that I captured into Bridge, and then I started rating them just to select the images that I want. So these are all potential images that I could have used. Some of them I was thinking about the fabric, the way it looked, and probably just compositing some other fabric flows that I liked. But I just decided to stick with one single image, which was actually this very one, just because I like the way the fabric, was flowing, the folds, the movement, everything just worked well for me. So that is what I imported into Photoshop, and then I began to work on it. So let me just hide all of these layers, and then we can walk through one after the other all the way through to the end. So I'm going to open my subject folder, and you can see that I have labeled all the folders just so I know where all of the elements are, or whatever adjustments I made that are separate or independent of any other adjustments. I just put them in separate groups so that I can be organized, and then so it's also going to be easy for me to make changes later on if I want to do that, or if I even just want to replicate everything that I have done onto some of the other images. It will be easy for me to follow through the steps and then achieve the same results. Alright, so opening the subjects folder, the first thing that I did was actually just to select my subject. And so if I hide everything right here and also just make this visible, you see that the background has gone into this checkerboard design. That actually lets you know that it is cut out of the background, and then anything that you put underneath is going to show through. So if I create a new layer, for example, and then I drag it underneath my subject, and I also take a brush, let me use blue, dark blue is fine, and then I start painting with 100% flow. You'd see that it's going directly behind my subject. So this actually opens up a world of opportunities. You can do anything and everything that you want to the background. You can decide to put like a whole city behind. The only thing is you have to mask and blend it very, very well, right? Even if I just wanted to use text instead of what I just did, I can press T for the type tool and then maybe just type PHLO, change the color also to the blue that we used, and press OK. And let me just make it very large. You notice that the text is just going to go behind my subject. So there really is a lot that you can do with masking. So what I decided to do, actually, let me just delete this flow layer because I don't need it, is instead of working directly behind my subject, what I decided to do is rather use the mask that I created on other layers or other groups, and then I can just work on top of my subject layer, if that makes sense. So instead of my subject being on top, I just wanted it to be at the bottom, since that's the first adjustment I made, and I know that from there going upwards I was just working on top of that layer, still keeping the transparency, because I was copying this transparency and applying it on the other layers that needed this masking. So I'm going to hide this mask so we see my background. And the first thing I actually did was just to heal some of the blemishes on her face. You guys have been following this channel, you know how I do this with a healing brush to just paint it over all of the blemishes until it looked good. Then the next thing I did was to use my actions, my frequency separation actions. Actually, my entire workflow actions is what I used. So I just ran the frequency separation part and then I smoothed out the image a little bit. Then after frequency separation, I went on to dodge and burn, where I added shape and also blended the skin a little bit better. So even though you see a group here called color work, I'm not going to show you that just yet because I didn't do it at this point. So I'll come back to it. I'm not going to close the group yet. We're just going to go into our sky replacements group. So I'm going to turn that on and I'm going to open that group as well. And then it's just if I can actually duplicate this onto a new, so let me right click, duplicate layer, and let me send it to a new document and press OK. It's just a simple cloud. So this is the actual image. And then you remember that I said I did the masking on the subject layer. So I just applied that mask onto this and then it cut out perfectly my subject through that. So that is what I did, right? So going back, we have our mask over here and you have our clouds also showing through. So any part that is white is where the cloud is going to show through, and anywhere that is dark or black isn't going to show through. Rather, your whatever layer is underneath is going to show through that. Okay, so from there I just decided to add this little bit of glow on the background just so it separates hair from the clouds even more, right? Then from there I also created a layer mask on the group of the clouds because I wanted to paint out some of the clouds at the bottom. If I go back to the raw file again, or the original clouds, you can see that it is even from bottom all the way to the top. But over here, when I turn on this, you notice that I've painted some transparency, because if I make this visible, you'd see that there are some black strokes or paint marks on this, meaning that anywhere that is black again is going to allow whatever layer is underneath to show through, right? So I'm not keeping the full transparency of the clouds. I'm just painting that in there just to, lighten it and also just add more depth or contrast again. So that pretty much is everything inside of the sky replacement group. So after I did that, what I noticed is that my subject was looking totally different from the clouds and I wanted the colors to match a little bit. So this is where I went into my subject group again, and then I created this color work group where in there I have just these hue saturation adjustments that I created just to shift the colors to blend with the sky a little bit. So let's start off with the first one. With the first one, you'd notice that what it's doing is just moving her skin tone, especially just adding some saturation. So if I just click on that, you see that in the master I bumped up the saturation and also brought down the lightness a little bit. Let's just go into the reds and see, and yellows. I didn't make any adjustments here. So this is just on the master layer where I bumped up the saturation a lot and then brought the lightness down, and you can see what it's doing is just adding more pop to our subject, right? Then from there, what I also did is I added another hue saturation, and in there, in the master, I went up into the blues just a little bit. I increased the saturation again and also brought down the lightness. And then if I go into the reds, this is where a lot of the changes actually happened. So if I just move the lightness back, you see that the red fabric is looking really, really bright, but when I brought the lightness down to -23, it just toned it down and then took your eyes away from the cloth. Then I also added a bit of saturation to it just to bump up the richness in the color, and then again I shifted it a little bit towards blue because that's something that is really dominant in the clouds that we have. All right, then from there I went into the yellows and I also just pulled that down a little, like a lot, -66 as you can see. Then I brought the saturation down and then I also brought the lightness down. So if I just move this back, you'd see that there is some kind of like richness in the color, but moving it this way just brings it down a lot. And then I brought it down to -10 on saturation and then also brought it -10 on lightness. So that's what I did with this hue saturation. And then with the next one, this is where I actually shifted the color a lot towards a color that blended a lot with the sky or with the clouds. So in there, if I double click, and we go into reds, because that's where the majority of the changes. You can see right now, if I move it to 0, we have the previous color in there, including the lightness, right? So what I did was I just moved this down till it got to like a purple color, and then I just brought the saturation down just a little bit like that till we got it to a point that matched the sky or had some similar tones to the sky. So that pretty much is everything that I did with color work inside the subject layer, right? So if I just do a before and after of the color work, you can see that now it's beginning to match. Previously you could tell that it wasn't like in the same space, but then just playing with this color work just brings everything into like a more uniform space, and I absolutely love it. So after my sky replacement and all these color shifts, the next thing I wanted to do is just add a bit more separation between my subject and the sky or the clouds, right? What I did is, if I open this right here, I just created this little glow. If I hide everything else, hopefully you should be able to see this. Let me just create a blank layer and fill it with black. Now you can see that we have this glow, right? And I also added the layer mask of my subject on there. If I just take it out briefly, this is just a glow that I put on there to add a bit of separation. Then I copied the layer mask that I had already made onto that glow layer so that it cuts out my subject, so that everything is just going to be behind my subject, just affecting the clouds. If I take out this black, then I also just shifted the color, because when I painted it was a white color. You can see that it's not adding a lot of separation. You can see it, but just warming it up just makes it a little bit more believable. Like maybe it's the sun, or there's a, like there's a warm tone in the background, and that is just adding a lot of separation to it, and I absolutely love it. Then from there, when I was studying the image, I realized that this is just a fine picture on its own, but I just felt it was too simple, almost boring, and it wouldn't really warrant a reason for me to shoot in the studio and promise you guys that there's going to be a part 2 where we're going to create something exciting. So I just thought I can introduce elements and add them to this image just to add a bit of interest and a bit more excitement, right? So what I decided to do was just to add a moon to the image, and this moon image is actually made up of 2 half moons. So if I open the group right here, and let me turn off these layer masks. Actually, let me just move this. So let me make a duplicate and move this into a new document and press OK. So it's actually just a picture of a moon. If I rotate that, this is the original image, right? And you can see that it's just a half moon that I imported, but because it is on a black background, it was easy for me to just set the blending mode into screen, and setting it to screen just hides all of the black. So if I change it to normal, you can see that we have this half moon on a black background on the image. I just rotated it a little bit so that when I add my second one, also change that to normal, then we can see that it forms like a circle or like a full moon, basically with a dark middle, right? So let me set it back to screen, set the other one, make it visible, and set it also to screen. So remember, if you have any image in your frame that has a black background, when you change the blending mode to screen, it is going to hide all the black pixels and then just keep the whites as and then make those show. So remember, if you want to show anything that is contrasted against black, just set the blending mode to screen. I'm also going to make my layer masks visible so that it cuts my subject out of the moon and then just places it behind here. So you know that we are using a lot of these moons. I could have just decided to put the layer mask on the group, and that would have worked as well, and then just delete these layer masks. That's also another way to do it. You can see it's still serving the same purpose, and that would actually have been a smarter way for me to work at that time. But then again, I mean, you just have those options as well. So right now we have our moon behind our subject. It's like forming like a crown, like a halo behind here, and I absolutely love it. It also adding more depth and contrast in the image, and it's something that I am here for. And from here, I still felt like the clouds looked a little bit empty, and to make this a little bit more believable or realistic, I just decided to add some birds. So if I go in there, this is the original birds image that I took. I took all these images or assets from Pexels. If you want to get assets for you to use for your images as well, you can check out Pexels. I'll put the link down below. They have amazing images that you can use for free for your work, right? So this is the original image, and what I did actually, if I just run you through again, is I just cut out certain areas. So let me change the blend mode from pin light to normal. So if I change it to normal, you can see that the original sky that we have behind our birds are actually what is showing through here, right? The pink. So if I just make it visible again, so all I did was I used my lasso tool and I just drew around the birds that I like. So if I like these birds, I'll draw around that, press shift to add a plus, and then I'm just adding all these. I didn't want to manually go in there and then select each of the birds. I just used the lasso tool and then drew around all of them like this, and then I hit Command J to make a duplicate of that. So if I hide this, you can see that these are the birds that I just drew around, and then they still brought that pink background onto the image. Now, a simple way for me to just get rid of all these pink backgrounds with the birds is to change the blending mode from normal down to pin light. Now, the way pin light works is anything that is light is actually going to disappear, and anything that is dark is going to be maintained. So if I hit Command T, it just brings this bounding box so I can move this around. Now you can see that when I move it into the background, every area that is, lighter than the background just disappears, and then everything that is darker also shows through. So I just move this around, press enter. I don't want it against the moon, so I'm just going to use the lasso tool again, draw around these birds, hit Command T, and then just drag them out as well. Maybe put them somewhere here, press enter. So this is all I was doing, just rearranging the bird arrangements or positions. Command T, move this somewhere here, and that is what I did actually for the entirety of the birds that I added, and I actually just arranged them to look like this. And then let me change the blending mode back to pin light. Perfect. And then we have our birds beautifully arranged, looking realistic in the background, and this is pretty exciting. So looking at the image at this point, I just felt we were still lacking a bit of color contrast. We were also lacking a bit of lighting contrast. So those are the next steps that I decided to take to complete the image. So starting off with our color grade, when I open that group, you notice that I have 3 different layers in there. So the first one is a color balance, and when I just double click on that, what I did is I just moved the midtones more towards red, moved the greens also towards magenta, and also added a bit of warmth in the yellow side, so moving all blues towards yellow, right? Then in the highlights, what I decided to do is again move the highlights towards yellow, and also just add a bit of cyan in there, and then move it towards green. Then in the shadow area, what I also decided to do is just add a bit of blue, add a bit of red, and then also add a bit of magenta. So combination of all these things just brings or shifts the hue towards this color that I absolutely love. Then I also brought the opacity down to 53% because I didn't want it to be a very strong effect. If I move it all the way to 100, this is what it looks like, and it's just overbearing. So just setting it down, even 50% should do. All right, and then this is what we have. So from there, I added a gradient map, and it's just a little hint of color. So when I double click on that, what I chose is this purple looking pastel color, that is pastel 09, and I just set the blending mode to soft light. If I change it back to normal and also increase it from 9% to 100, this is what we have. So this is the pastel layer that I added in the gradient map, but then I decided to drop the opacity to about 9%, or let me make it 10 in this case. And then from there, I just felt like it was just making the image a little bit too soft, opening up too many shadows. I actually love it now, but there isn't a lot of contrast, and I love contrast in my images. So from there, I just decided to shift the blend mode from normal down to soft light, and this just punched the contrast a bit and also maintained the colors that I chose in the pastel. So after applying this pastel color, the next thing I wanted to do was just add a color lookup to this, and I actually used one of the default 3D LUTs that Photoshop provides you with. So when I double click on that and just click on here, you can see that I'm using the teal orange plus contrast. That is what I used for this image, and then I changed the blending mode to soft light and then also change opacity to 11%. So let me set this to normal, and then let me set this to 100% and show you. So this is what the actual effect looks like, but then changing the blend mode to soft light is going to add a bit of that natural color that exists in the image back in there, and also bump up the contrast, and then just setting it down to, let me just make this 10% as well. That just puts a little bit of that contrast in there, and I absolutely love it. So after doing this, this is the entire color grade. So before, after, you can see that there is a bit of richness to the colors in the image, and there's also a little bit of contrast, and I absolutely love it. So from there, now I just wanted to relight the image just a tiny bit so that our eyes are drawn to, the brightest part of the frame. And so what I did with that, if I open the group, is first of all started with two curves. The first curve is a darkened curve. So if I just hide this right here, this is a darkened curve. You can see that it is darkening the entire image, but because I don't want it to be present or visible in the entire frame, I added a layer mask and I just made it visible in this bottom left corner. So here's a before and here's an after, and I can see that it is darkening that lower part of the frame, and then your eyes are being drawn to the brightest part of the frame, which is like the top right part. But that wasn't just all I did. I created another curves, and in there I brightened the whole master curves layer, and then I also went into the reds. I bumped up the reds a little bit, went into the green, just bumped up the green a tiny bit, and then also did the same thing in the blue. I brought the blue down just a little bit. All right, so doing all of those just moves the skin tones into a nice area, and also just adds a bit of brightening to the top right part of the frame, because on that layer mask I have it visible in the top right corner. But that wasn't enough. From there I just created this little flare, and it's just a brush that I selected and then just painted this glow in the top right corner. And then I also just changed the blending mode to overlay and brought the opacity to 37%. So if I change it to normal and then set it to 100%, this is all that I did, right? And you can see that I've painted it out of her face, and I actually didn't even do a good job. So let me just erase this out of her face, out of her shirt just a little bit. Paint it out of here, just like that. And then I'm going to drop the opacity again to, let's say, 35%. And then I'll change the blending mode to overlay. And then that just gives me this. I think at this point I can even just increase the opacity a little bit more. So somewhere around here, I think looks good. All right, so if I close this relighting group, do a before and after, you can see that now your eyes are drawn to the top part of the frame, before and after, and that looks absolutely amazing. Maybe I just want to tone down the saturation in her skin just a little bit. All right, I'm actually doing this right now, looking at the image again, because it's something I'd already done. I'm just going to go into hue saturation, and I'll just target this area right here. It says it's reds. I'll just pull the saturation down just like that, and also just pull the lightness down a little bit. Now I'm going to hit B for my brush tool, invert the layer mask so that it fills it with black, and then now I can paint with white just in the areas that I want. And what I want to do is just, fill her face, her skin tones primarily, with this new adjustment that I made. All right, so now that I've painted this into her skin tones, I can just play with the opacity, maybe just come down to about 53% before and after. that is looking really good. I really like it. And this is our before, this is our after. So actually at this point, if I want to make any changes, like further adjustments, whatever be the case, I can actually do it. Maybe add more of a vignette, make sure she's more central in the frame, like anything, I can just do that at this point. Add some sharpening, whatever it is, I can actually do that. But I'm fine with the way the image looks right now. Maybe I just want to darken her shirt a little bit, so I'll create a curves adjustment and then just target her shirts and draw that down. Hit Command I to invert the layer mask one more time, and then just paint over here into her shirt and then just darken that down like so. So this is why sometimes when I'm doing these things, I don't always just submit the images right after I'm done editing. Sometimes I will want to, sleep on the work, have another look at it, another go and see if I absolutely love it, or if I want to make some changes, whatever the case may be, I will then do it. Maybe I even want to take out some of the color from the dress, right? So go to hue saturation. I'm just going to click on there. It says there are blues in there. So I'm going to desaturate the blues, and I think I like it when it's black. Also click in her hair, just click around. It says there's a magenta in her hair. I'll just pull that out. You can see it's affecting the fabric as well, but I don't mind. So what I'm going to do is hit Command I and go in with my brush again, and this time I'm going to paint it using white over her outfit. So her entire outfit, I'm just taking that blue hint out. And then also do the same thing to the skirts this time. And then go into her hair and then just paint that into her hair. Now that I've taken the colors out, here's a before and after. You can see that now we have like a better effect. I think now there's more of a separation between hair and everything else, but then it still looks like everything comes together nicely. So to just sell this point home, I'm just going to reduce opacity to about 70%, and then this should just be like the sweet spot, blending all of these adjustments that we've made. So let me just group these, and then let me just call it final touch. And that pretty much is everything that I have done to this image. Hit Command S to save. Here is our before, here is our after. So walking you through one more time. Initially I replaced the background, put in some clouds, added a bit more separation, I added a moon, I added birds, I color graded the image to a point I liked, I relit the image just to put emphasis on lighting in certain parts of the frame, and then now I just darken her outfit just so it sets her more in place, and I absolutely love what we've done. So here's a before, here's an after. Tell me what you think about this image in the comments down below. If you want to see more fun work done in Photoshop like this, let me know in the comments down below. I'll catch you guys in the next video, and remember, don't ever give up.